Call the May 17th, 2023 meeting of the Moines MPO Executive Committee to order. Ask for approval of the agenda.
Move. Second.
Open the second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And abstentions. Motion carries. We do have several meeting minutes to approve. First, the April 12 meeting minutes.
Move. Second.
Motion.
May I? The executive committee, 11:30 a.m. Wednesday, April 12th. The minutes do not reflect I was present,
Okay,
so if that change can be made, I would appreciate it.
okay,
I'll get that change.
all right. So with that change.
Amend my motion.
Okay.
Approve.
Second.
Are we approving all of the minutes?
No, we're doing it one at a time.
Okay, gotcha.
Second.
All right, any further discussion on that one? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, that carries. Then the April 25 minutes.
Approved.
Motion by Lynn.
Second.
Did you miss 24?
No, it was April 12. We just did April 12. Now it's April 25, right?
Isn't it?
I got 4 bullets on my
24.
24.
Well, I don't know, whatever. 24 and 25.
I have 24, 25 and May 4th.
Yeah.
Okay, my version is limited. Okay.
Oh, why the version?
All right, so then the April 24 meeting. So there's a motion by Lynn,
Second.
second by Stephanie. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carries. April 25 meeting.
So move.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carries. The May 4 meeting,
Move.
I'm missing.
you're missing from that, Lynn, so. With that
Lynn,
change-
nobody wanted to include you.
You gotta start showing up, man.
All right, with that change, there's a motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carries. All right, thank you. Item 4 is a consensus vote on the approval of the April financial statement. Ted?
Okay, the finance subcommittee continues to meet each month, to review, the financials and, try to kind of iteratively improve the financial statements. The big change from the April statement is that if you recall, we had about $1 million, category called reconciliation discrepancies. And that was part of the change from the outside bookkeeping to the internal accounting. After further review, that was determined to be retained earnings. And so it's been recategorized with retained earnings in the financial statement. So that was done at the advice of our auditor. And I think that was the main update. Is that right, Dylan? Yeah. So the finance subcommittee recommended that the MPO receive and file the April financial statement.
All right, thank you. Ted, any questions? Ted? Is there an option?
I'd like to make just a statement. I understand them and staff's working with our account to make changes to QuickBooks to incorporate water trails. That's a great thing. We're moving in the right direction. Glad to see that happening. I'm also glad to see the verification signatures now on the document. So we are making progress and that's doing a good job of keeping it on track.
All right. Is there a motion?
Move.
All right, thanks, Lynn. Motion in a second. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, that carries. Item 5 is the consent and vote on contracts and expenses. Dylan?
Thank you. We've got 3 items for you today. The first one is the sponsorship the MPO did for the CRE Transit Issues Forum last month. We also have some legal fees related to the water trails account, and then we have our third of 4 payments to Iowa State University Intrans for a development of data, the trail data management program. These are all in the budget or in line with the budget, so we'd ask for your approval.
So question, just a real quick question about the water trail legal fees. Are we asking for reimbursement like we did with Transload for the legal fees?
That has not been discussed.
Okay, I just wondered. All right, I'll move approval.
Just a comment. The CRB Trends and Issues Forum, I know that it was approved. I don't have a problem with approving it. But for future, because there's been recent discussion about not funding things that aren't 100% transportation related, that could come under that umbrella. And so next year, when it comes up before that committee for approval. Just bear that in mind. If it doesn't seem like something that would be funded, maybe give the business record a heads up as a courtesy that they might move on.
Well, we've been talking about that in item nine, or I made on the work plan, right?
Yes.
So, but now's the time to talk about that for the next one. And well, when we come up to that line items.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. I apologize.
I said that, given recent discussions about not wanting to fund anything that's not 100% transportation related, that we look at these forums that we're sponsoring for next year. With that transportation in mind. And if this is one of those things that is chosen not to be funded, that we give the business record a heads up as a courtesy.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So we do have a budget to defer for the next year.
We have the sponsorship kind of general in there, and we somewhat know what those are gonna be, but it's flexible.
I need to approve.
I think that's your second, Joe moved to your second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carries. Thank you. Item 6 is a report and vote on the Mid-Iowa Planning Alliance contract amendment. John?
Thank you. As you recall, last month at the policy committee and really for the last several months, we've been having conversations about the MIPA contract. And we have up there, but again, just to reiterate, that the three key pieces of that contract are, one is office space and other back end support. And then we have the supervisory support for MIPA staff and then supplemental planning support. The direction that we heard last month at the policy committee was that we want to start phasing this out over the next year. And one of the first things that we can do to phase that out is to strike number 2, that supervisory support beginning of the fiscal year. So that would be our recommendation, is to take that out and amend this contract so that all parties are aware of that. We've already discussed this with the MIPA staff and with the MIPA board, that this would just make everything, official and above board. I would note too that the budget that we'll talk about here in a moment also assumed that this change would happen. So we've taken out those, the costs associated with that, as well as the hours that MPO staff provided to make up for those services. If there's questions about this, I'm happy to take them, but otherwise this would be our recommendation to you.
Question for Dylan on this. Their motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Close same sign. Abstentions, motion carries. Item 7 is a report and vote on the fiscal year 23 budget amendment.
Okay, so for the current year, Unified Planning Work Program, just have a couple of amendments that the staff and finance subcommittee have looked at and are recommending. You can see the 3 that are up there. Dylan, do you have any details you want to?
Yeah, I can walk through this a little bit in more detail. So the first one there, the routine end of year adjustments, when we put together our work program for the DOT portion of it, which is the bulk of it, there's different work elements. So we have long range planning and funding and multimodal planning, all of those different ones. We sometimes need to adjust those within the budget. Doesn't change the overall budget, but it just moves some funding around within those work elements. Doing that just allows us to recoup all the funds that we anticipate getting from the DOT and that we anticipate expending through the rest of the year. So that's a routine thing that we normally do this time of year, and this year is no exception. The second one is a University Avenue planning study. City of West Des Moines received some SDBG funds for a planning study a few years ago. This was in our budgets in 21 and 22. We didn't put it in 23 because the project was close to wrapping, but there was some work that spilled over. So we need to add that to our budget so that West Des Moines can get paid for the remaining portion of that contract. And then the final one is the cost associated with the director's severance agreement. If you recall, a lot of the paid time off was to be paid at the end of this fiscal year. The rest of it's to be paid next fiscal year. So we just need to add the costs in there to cover that. We also added some additional costs to pay out just anticipated year-end staff vacation buyout. This is in line with our handbook too. So on the next slide there, you can kind of see what this shakes out to. This was in the agenda packet too, and this probably isn't very legible. But the University Avenue project goes into work element 4. The severance payout goes into work element 6, and then all of those kind of adjust for that first one too. If there's any questions about this, happy to take them, but otherwise we'd recommend your approval. As Ted said, the finance subcommittee recommended approval as well.
So we talked about, the handbook yesterday, and talked about everyone's accrued vacations. Did you put this in the budget that we're actually going to try to get everybody back to the same.
So this will get us through up until, this covers anticipated buyout, anybody above the 240 hours that is allowed to be carried over for our handbook.
Right,
What we anticipate for this fiscal year, until that other stuff's settled, we
okay,
might need to do something similar, but we'll be already well on our way to buying that now.
okay.
Any other questions, discussion? Your motion.
Move approval.
Motion by Lynn,
Second.
second by Matt. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Close same sign. Abstentions. Motion carries. And then item A is report and vote on fiscal year 24, for budget final draft.
Okay, so this is for the upcoming year. If you recall, I don't know, a month or two ago, we approved the kind of draft version that went to the DOT. The DOT provided some feedback, so that's been incorporated, and then I think the severance package has also been incorporated into that as well. So again, finance committee looked at it and approved it. Dylan, do you have any other details?
Yeah, I can walk through a few other things and just to let you know what's been in there. So if you go to the next slide. Just to recap, and we shared this with you last time, and this really hasn't changed, just some newer notable projects. This year, we have to do the long range transportation plan, so that's going to be a bulk of our focus. The comprehensive safety action plan, that's the funding that we received from the US DOT for that Safe Streets for All program. That's going to be another big focus. There's a few other projects that are listed up there. Innovative transportation funding might be the one that's been added since we saw this last. With the infrastructure bill that came out 18 months ago or so, there's just new opportunities to finance projects and to fund projects. So we put a work element in there or a project in there to continue to explore that. And we're going to try to have a speaker for you here in the next month or two to hear more about what that could look like. If you go to the next slide, this just runs through what has been changed since you saw this in March. We had 3 main comments from the US DOT, and those were pretty minor. There's emphasis areas that the US DOT came out with. We added those in there and added more discussion about that. This year with the infrastructure bill, there's a portion of our funding that has to be used on complete streets. And so we beefed that up a little bit more in accordance with what DOT wanted to see. And then just made a note that Safe Streets for All funding is a separate agreement that we'll have to enter into. It doesn't go into our normal agreement and contract with DOT. As we talked about before, we removed watershed management services from that from the MPO's activities. As we just talked about, we removed the supervisory support for MIPA, updated budget, some budget information, and just kind of made it more transportation focused overall and took out some of the non-transportation elements through that, whether that's environmental or otherwise. And then as Ted said, the severance agreement for the director was put in there as well, which affects the budget. So getting into the budget side of things, and I apologize, this might be hard to read, but it was in the agenda packet too as well. You can see there the costs and revenues side by side, and just to cut to the chase, at the end of the year, we're projecting a surplus of about $3,400 after costs and revenues are taking into place. And we have a pretty healthy balance as well, even after accounting for the severance agreement and stuff. We have about a $1.6 million carryover in our reserve budgets. So I think that's all we have for you today. Like I said, the finance subcommittee reviewed this and approved it. DOT's comfortable with where we're at too, so we'd ask for your sign off and we'll get that submitted to DOT.
You know, that looks much better than the first time it was given to us. I move approval. I already moved it. Joe.
Second. Not loud enough. You weren't loud enough, Dean. All right, I apologize.
Mr. Mayor, speak up.
I get it. Dean, I'll move these. Look back.
You know what, give it to Joe. He wants it.
No.
Motion, Connor, second by God. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions. That motion carries. All right, thank you. Item 9 is report and vote on the water trails line of credit agreement.
Sure, yep. So we've got a couple different items that are on the agenda for today. These were previously on, I think, last month's calendar. The first item is this line of credit. This is something that's not new to the MPO, although I'm new to the MPO. This, I think, started back in 2021 and then readdressed in 2022. In short, it relates to line of credit, $15 million, the Bankers Trust, as in relation to the Scott Street project. You know, you're all aware of the build grant, the federal build grant. In addition to that, the state of Iowa, which is a second item that we'll address here through the Destination Iowa grant, has awarded funding, and then of course the MPO and so many others have raised private money through various pledges to meet the overall cost. Throughout the process, there's going to be a mechanism whereby the construction is going to occur and reimbursement from the federal government will happen under the bill grant, but the timing of that may not necessarily align with when pledges are coming in and other items. And so to ensure that the project's not interrupted, the water trails, of which I am a co-chair, thought to ensure that we had sufficient funding in place to ensure, I guess, a streamlined build out. This isn't making up a deficit, but rather helping ensure kind of everything is streamlined. So that's a really high level overview. I know we have our treasurer here, Chris Costa, our executive director, Hannah Inman, and others. So happy to address whatever questions may be out there.
Len, I think you have some questions and comments. You want to start on that?
Yeah, I have a statement I'd just like to read into the
All right.
record. Now that we've embarked on the Water Trails project, the project must succeed, and we want it to succeed because it will be a great amenity that benefits every metro community. This project needs to be supported by a line of credit, and in fact is required by the various grants, agreements, and sub-agreements that we have entered into with our partners on this project. But this path to a line of credit is seriously flawed and on its own merit violates many of the agreements and sub-agreements and puts the MPO member government and taxpayers at financial risk. If you take the time to read each grant award, agreement, sub-agreement, they clearly list each entity's responsibilities and timelines for the Water Trails project. We've relied on staff and legal and trusted they were reviewing the documents and providing us complete and accurate information to ensure we were complying with the requirements spelled out in the grant awards and subsequent legal agreements, sub-agreements, and exhibits. The line of credit agreement was pulled from the last agenda and was once again being submitted for review and approval. I want to bring to your attention several issues concerning the proposed line of credit agreement. Sub-agreement 4, section 2 project funding states the MPO's financing obligation is limited to such allocated funds, which include the build grant funds and the STBG fund of $25,550,000. In accordance with the amended and restated sub-agreement to Exhibit B to Agreement Services, Central Iowa Water Trails shall be responsible for raising and securing all funds in excess of the $25 million build grant secured by the MPO, then the $550,000 surface transportation block grant funds necessary to construct the project. The Water Trails line of credit is the sole responsibility of Central Iowa Water Trails, and Central Iowa Water Trails is responsible to deposit funds in excess of the allocated funds necessary to complete construction of the project in the project account. The proposed business loan agreement, the asset base operating account states borrower, Central Iowa Water Trails, shall cause the MPO to establish and maintain the project account with lender and shall cause the MPO to deposit sufficient funds into the project account to pay all items presented for payment, including service charges imposed by lender. Sub-agreement 4, section 3, bank account states the MPO shall open a bank account at a local financial institution hereinafter the project account. How this became a joint MPO icon account should be of concern and was not in compliance with sub-agreement 4 or consistent with the description of the project account ownership and the business loan agreement. The fact that Central Iowa Water Trails can require the MPO to establish an account with Bank of Trust is not within the purview of Central Iowa Water Trails, and to cause the MPO to pay all service charges is also suspect. Considering Central Iowa Water Trails is responsible to deposit funds in excess of the allocated funds necessary to complete the construction of the project in the project account. This should include maintaining the minimum balance in project account to avoid finance charges. According to sub-agreement 4, the MPO is only responsible for allocated funds to build grant STBG awards. Approval of this agreement will be in direct violation of sub-agreement 2 and sub-agreement 4 by both parties. The line of credit was required to be in place prior to bid letting. I am not sure when the bid letting occurred, but the public hearing on bid acceptance was held on November 8th of 2022 at 4 p.m. For the last 7 months, the MPO has lacked protection from financial liability for the Water Trails project. According to Subagreement 4, Section 4, line of credit, Central Iowa Water Trails will obtain a line of credit in an amount equal to 110% of the engineer's final estimate cost, less the $25,550,000 in federal funds. The most recent project cost estimate in accordance with the IEDA grant that we're going to be looking at in a minute is $53,500,000 and would now require a line of credit to be established in the amount of $30,745,000, not the proposed line of credit of $15 million. All of the loan agreements list an expiration date of December 30th, 2025. That does not meet the requirements of Subagreement 4. It states the line of credit must remain in effect until the final audit is complete and the project is closed out after final payment is made by the MPO to its general contractor or the earlier termination of Agreement 2. The First Amendment and restated grant agreement under the fiscal year 2019 Build Transportation Grants Program, Section 2.4, says the budget period end date is July 30th of 2027. And Section 7.4 states the Prospect Park Birdland Marina components must begin construction before September 30th of 2027, and confirmation to the Iowa DOT no later than June 30th of 2027. The promissory note includes a step-down provision that states the principal available under this note will be reviewed on the 1-year anniversary of the closing of this loan and annually thereafter through the note's maturity. Borrower acknowledges lender has the right to reduce the principal available under this note in its sole discretion in response to the percentage of the completion of phase 1 construction at the end of said review. Nowhere in any of the agreements have I read that Central Iowa Water Trails is allowed to reduce the overall line of credit based on the percentage of project completion. The MPO is listed as a grantor to the commercial pledge agreement. And by signing this agreement, we are offering the lender a security interest in the MPO as collateral. Collateral means all grantors' property, however owned, if more than one, in the possession of or subject to the control of the lenders, whether existing now or later, and whether tangible or intangible in character, including without limitation each and all of the following: all property to which the lender acquires title or documents of title, all property assigned to lender, all promissory notes, bills of exchange, stock certificates, bonds, investment property, saving, passbook, time certificates of deposit, insurance policies, and all other instruments of evidences of an obligation. All records related to any of the property described in the collateral section, whether in the form of writing, microfilm, microfiche, or electronic media, all income and proceeds from the collateral as defined herein. The promissory note and commercial pledge agreement also identifies collateral and states borrower acknowledges this note is secured by an assignment of deposit account, commercial checking account, commercial money market, and those are held by Central Iowa Water Trails, and a commercial pledge agreement for account 3880814 executed by the Des Moines MPO organization. The assignment of deposit account also has a provision for power of attorney, where the grantor, Central Iowa Water Trails, appoints its true and attorney in fact, irrevocably, and with power of substitution to do the following: to demand, collect, receive, receipt for, sue, and recover all sums of money or other property which may now or hereinafter become due, owing, or payable from the collateral. To execute, sign, and endorse any and all claims, instruments, receipts, checks, drafts, or warrants issued in payment for the collateral. To settle or compromise any and all claims arising from the collateral and in place stead to grantor, to execute and deliver its release and settlement for the claim, and to file any claim or claims or to take any action or institute or take part in any proceedings either on its own name or in the name of the grantor, or otherwise which is in the discretion of the lender may seem to be necessary or advisable. This power is given as security for the indebtedness, and the authority hereby conferred is and shall be irrevocable and shall remain in full force and effect until renounced by lender. I would like to hear a legal opinion on whether this means that Bankers Trust attorneys are being given the power to collect all current or future government assessments paid to the MPO and to file suit against the MPO and member governments to collect their indebtedness. I do not believe the MPO's 2080 agreement signatories have given the authority of the MPO to assign away its present and future assessments, reserve funds, or the joint possessions of the MPO as collateral to secure a bank loan that in accordance with agreements and sub-agreements is solely the responsibility of Central Iowa Water Trails. If the water trails,
Lynn, can I just,
I'm done, one sentence.
okay,
If the water trails project should fail for some unforeseen circumstance and the lender exercises its rights according to these multiple agreements, the MPO as an entity may no longer exist, and there is a potential that local governments could be sued on behalf of Central Iowa Water Trails.
let's, I don't know who wants to start address. Scott, do you want to address, or Anna, Chris, Colleen, I don't know who wants to, do you want to try to address from the water trail standpoint first? Or some of the issues for that.
We probably have a team approach, but I mean, there was so much thrown out there.
There's a lot of those agreements.
It'd be a lot easier if we could go through these
Yeah.
in a bullet point fashion. We have responses to many of the questions that were brought up, but it's gonna take a combination.
Let's start with the collateral issue, because I was looking at that earlier, and I understand what the pledge agreement says, but as a practical matter, the way I read that, and Scott, Colleen, whoever, correct me if I'm wrong, it does secure the one water trails account, but MPO does not have any other assets in Bankers Trust possession. We don't keep any accounts there, so none of our other operating accounts would be subject to the pledge agreement. Am I reading that correctly?
That's my understanding.
So in
Do we
actuality,
have that verbally in the record? I didn't hear your response.
I said that's my understanding.
that's a clear reading of the agreement, the way I read it. It says anything in the possession of the lender. And the lender has no other assets of the MPO.
That's consistent with my understanding, Bob.
So the only collateral is the Bankers Trust bank account. It's not our reserve. It's not the assessment, correct, Scott? Is legally, is that how you read the agreement? Because I think that's probably the biggest concern that Lynn and others probably in this room would have. Is if our assessment and the reserve fund of 1.6 million is being used as collateral for this line of credit. That's not the case, correct?
That is my understanding. Now, I was not entirely prepared for this discussion. I didn't realize we were gonna go back into the nuances of the documents.
Okay.
So
But you've reviewed the documents
I had
before.
reviewed them previously.
So is that how you're, I mean, is that your legal opinion to our board? That it is only the bank account is the collateral?
You're asking for a specific legal opinion. I'd like the opportunity to draft one.
Okay,
But that's,
well, I guess we're gonna continue this item then.
Okay, here's the thing, and number one, this stuff's really out of my league. I read it,
Both of them.
and been sleeping, material. But, I said, we've had a tough couple months here, as you all know. Trying to work through a lot of these issues and I shared with you all, it should be no surprise that I was not here when the decision was made for the MPO to be the lead, basically on the build grant and or any of the other work we're doing with water trails, nor do I think it was a good idea for this organization to take that position. I thought, not that I don't support the project, because I do, I told that was appropriate vehicle, but hey, that ship's sailed. I get it, we gotta get it done, we gotta figure a way to make it happen, we gotta collectively do this so that we can have a positive outcome for the entire community. Having said that, the points that Len brings up, I think are good, and the only reason I say that, I don't want to do anything or vote in any manner that would expose this organization in a negative manner and or make a manner and or any of the member governments in a negative manner. And frankly, I'm not knowledgeable enough to sit here today and say yay or nay to either one of those things. That, I mean, people say, trust me, look, I read it, we're all good. I get all that. But probably for me, until I have, and this issue was just brought up most recently. And I do have our civil division taking a look at some of these points that the councilman from Pleasant Hill makes. But until I get our civil division to look at me and say, you're good, Tom, you're good representing Polk County and the MPO with all these documents, I can't get there.
So, Tom, thank you. I have a suggestion.
Okay.
And I think maybe work. You know, we do need to get these done. I think everybody's in agreement. We need this to succeed. We need to get this done. My suggestion would be that we table these documents for today. Give Scott, Glenn, if we can get your concerns in writing, so we have those, so Scott can go through that. Review the documents, come back. We have another meeting of the executive committee at 3 o'clock tomorrow ahead of the policy meeting. Is that?
It's a pretty short window, but
Well, I understand, but
yeah, I know, I get it.
you know, we need to get these done, and we've already got policy set for 4 o'clock.
Right.
I can't be here tomorrow.
You're not gonna be at
I
executive
can't,
policy.
I will be in Oklahoma.
Okay. So do you have, is Ben or who's gonna be sitting in for your place?
It could be Ben Champ or,
Well, he can't be in exec, but he will be a replacement of this policy. You can't have a designated exec, so. Well, let's.
Bob, can I ask, are you talking about all of the icon matters or solely the line of credit matter?
line of credit.
You're only, okay, so your only issues with the line of credit.
And its compliance with all the agreements or change the agreements. It doesn't matter, but if we're going to be in compliance with agreements, which are legal documents, they have to equal what we're signing on to do here.
Well, do we have language from Bankers Trust that says that it's solely the account?
I'll look at
which
you guys
piece you
and
read.
say, you do have the,
It's in the budget. So, I mean, part of the issue is that there's form language in this budget. agreement.
yes,
But the key language, as Bob kind of pointed out, is in the possession of or subject to the control of lender. And so nothing, no other form of collateral
It's still.
is subject to their reach, except for that in their possession or control. And it specifically lists the interest in the deposit account and deposit account.
so can we eliminate the form language that's in every form that kind of goes back to our collateral question of our assessments and the reserve? I mean, are they willing to take some of that form language out, so we kind of, we look at it a little bit differently? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, legally it's clear.
it is legally clear.
Legally it's clear, but I guess to your point, I mean, it does list these other things in there, but it's not legal. I mean, like that's not what it legally
Well,
defined.
then why can't we take it out then, I guess would be my question.
I don't represent Bankers Trust, but this is a form pledge agreement that is used, you know,
It's a banker, it's,
it's a bank.
but yeah, unfortunately, that's what the banker said. It's very hard to. Brian, you got a point?
Just something to be considered that I'd sort of like to have an answer for, maybe it's here today, but it's my understanding that, at least it has been from the beginning of the discussion on this, that the sub-agreements for the build grant included requirements that the line of credit be in place by the bid date. This thing's been bid 3 times in 2021 and twice in 2022. Why wasn't, where's the line of credit? It was required. What happened?
So I think, Mayor, fair question, and maybe Hannah, we talked about this. Are you able to speak a little bit about the process and kind of the rationale?
I'll let Chris and Jackie Pullen is the CFO on the project as well. She is here with us to answer questions. So the line of credit was secured or authorized by Bankers Trust in early 2021. However, due to scope changes and changes within staffing, the most recent final authorization for the actual terms of the agreement are now. So it's much like when you get a pre-auth for a mortgage, you don't actually sign the final mortgage agreement until you actually are expending the money. And part of it is so that we don't have to do a continuous, extension when we're not spending any of that money. And it's clear that the money that we are spending is for cash flow issues, but the reason why the scope has changed even from the beginning when we authorized the line of credit with Bankers Trust in early 2021. And I don't know, Jackie or Chris, if you want to add to that.
I guess all I would add is there was the separation of Great Outdoors Foundation and the Water Trails group that happened during 21. So any agreement we would have entered into before then would have had to have been amended or restructured once they were separated. So that was part of the thinking is the law. So we have the organization in place. It's ultimately going to be on the plan.
So you mentioned the line of credit wasn't really necessary until we actually started expending funds. That happened during a special meeting back November 8th. We made our first commitment to pay, correct? Yes. So for the last 7 months, we had no line of credit.
But to me, it's required.
I can jump in on that. That is a correct statement. Icon Water Trails has cash reserves from both other public and private donations and funding sources, and those cash reserves have been used consistently since then and into the foreseeable future to fund those payouts that have been made. So we have only at this point in time, to my knowledge, received one reimbursement, even from the through the bill grant at this point in time, and all other funding has come from the public and private reserves of Congress.
Would it be accurate to say that I think you guys, you're probably out front stockpiling material, but please bear with me because I'm not a construction expert, but talking with our public works director, it sounded like you probably had to stockpile a lot of material. Like this year, let's use rock as an example. You pile and pile of rock, and that's just an example. But then until that's placed and complete, you don't get a reimbursement. So you're paying for all that now. And you're not going to get a reimbursement until the rock is placed where it's supposed to be.
Correct, that is correct.
So you're kind of behind a rock and a hard place. No pun intended. I'm sorry. That just came to me, Dean, how quick I. It was good. Yeah, you were. Yeah. So, yeah, okay. Bob, I think your idea is a good one. I'm sorry, Lynn can't be here. Just if I can get a little bit more comfortable after our civil division takes a look at the language for me. Not that I don't trust you guys and everything you're doing. I think it's a fiduciary responsibility that I have to Polk County as well as this organization. To say, hey, we're good or whatever. Still trying to keep the timeline you guys are on. But I think Len brings up some good points and clearly he's read everything.
Oh, no.
Multiple times.
Oh, no. I just got a whole list of stuff from the DOT. There's a lot more paper chase than we've ever seen. And I've not been through all of it. Okay.
So can I ask, because it is important for purposes of exactly what you said, timing of disbursements, reimbursement, and everything else. Scott, are you able to take time to review these materials? I mean, 'cause I agree, right? I agree with what you're saying. We don't want to unnecessarily or at all subject the MPO to any additional liability or concerns. in advance of this meeting, I shared several calls with folks and got to a point of comfort, recognizing exactly as Colleen is that this is collateral held by the bank, you know, and confirmed that we MPO don't have anything else at the bank. Having said all of that, I want to make sure you're going to be in a position, Scott, to offer an opinion to the group tomorrow at 3 o'clock, if in fact that's what we do. I mean, I don't want to get here at 3 o'clock tomorrow and then, well, there's a pile of documents I can look at.
Yeah, since I've been asked for a formal legal opinion, I guess that's why I've asked for the opportunity to take the time. And with Len's, you know, as long as Len gets me everything right away,
You'll have it.
I don't sleep much anyway, so.
That's great. Go ahead.
But we don't need, do we need the line of credit before tomorrow? I mean,
No,
we can pay all the bills.
Sidebar, folks.
We don't need anything to have it done by tomorrow. I mean,
As long, I'm okay, as long as we can say, okay, and I'll have Civil, I talked to him this afternoon, so he's back in the office. Get through it quickly, and then if we can go on record at our meeting at 3 o'clock tomorrow with a legal opinion for the organization saying, yeah, here's what it all means, and this is the opinion of the general counsel for the organization, then.
I want to make sure it's right.
Yeah,
And I don't want to rush it less than 24 hours. If we don't need.
Something to,
Yeah.
we're kind of negotiating in good faith. We have our attorney, you guys have your attorney. My concern is now 18 different attorneys are gonna take a look at these documents and have all these different comments. By day, when I'm not volunteering, I'm a problem solver. So if there's a way that we could get one group or one person who you guys have appointed as your representative, let's work through these issues. If we have to make some changes to the line of credit agreement, we're happy to do what we can do, but let's understand all the issues instead of having a firing line, you know, each time we come to present.
No,
I agree.
Chris, I appreciate that. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna pull the line of credit from this month entirely. We're not gonna have a special meeting tomorrow. Let's take a little more time. We'll get it right. And we will bring this back up in the.
Yeah, I think that is.
And who is responsible for the line of credit? Is it Icon or is it the MPO? Because our piece is the 25 million that's in there at the beginning.
It's Icon.
So the issue is that all the reimbursements are at 80%, right? So we are expending the money, so, and it's mainly Icon private funds, and then it's reimbursed by 80%. That 80% reimbursement goes into the project account that the MPO is the sole owner of. So the way that we are dealing with the cash flow issues, when we have those crunches of either, you know, we have more pledges receivables that aren't covering that, or the reimbursement has not come in from our previous 60 days, is that's when we draw into the line of credit. However, the project account is solely owned by the MPO per our agreement. So for us to guarantee a line of credit, we need to provide some assurance that Icon can get those reimbursement funds. Thus why we're in this agreement. And per the previous agreement that Icon could not be on the project account, that is why Bankers Trust wants to have MPO account as collateral, because that is the money due to reimburse the line of credit.
So is it a joint account?
No.
And what collateral?
I
is
would
the
like to
MPO
have that reviewed by legal as another piece of this, because the information and the bank account information I've been provided shows both. So if it's joint, that's a problem. I'd like to see that. And if we can get this other mess cleaned up, that we're only talking about that account and all this other language that's just normally a part of an agreement gets removed on that liability, I'm thrilled. Or amend the agreements. I'm fine with that too.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. You asked the question. I didn't hear what you said.
What's the collateral? That the MPO would provide? I mean, when we.
The bank account.
It's the one account.
It's whatever money's in the bank account that they're putting all the money in there from their private donations.
So it's limited to that one account. We'd have no other response.
Joe,
That's the question.
That's part of what needs
Councilman
to
Murray
be
has
resolved.
false opinion.
I agree.
That's correct, that the collateral is what is reimbursed from the bill agreement. That will go into the MPO account.
Not the private donation money goes
No,
in there?
not private, that's.
Well, how do you pay, how are we paying the bills then?
Let the state.
How do you think our 20%?
Okay, so, I am not aware that this is joint account. I have no visibility to it, so, I will gladly listen to that as well. We do, Icon and MPO have, the two accounting teams collaborate every week on what's going on with that account. We have visibility to that account only through MPO's accounting team, so, and it is that sole account that is questioned here. On the way it works, the MPO receives from the owner's rep all of the contract payment information, one of which is on the agenda here shortly. We collaborate together on whether or not, first of all, that we check all the boxes for compliance. And then when it comes up for payment, it comes on the agenda. We collaborate between the two accounting teams, how much money is in the account. Because once again, MPO is seeking reimbursement and reimbursement goes to this account. And any money that is additionally needed is funded from Icon's private funds as a direct transfer to this account on behalf of the IPO. So now we have potentially some of the bill grant reimbursement and private funds from the Icon checking account into the same account so that we can make one pay application payment out of that account. So that's how it all works.
And to our knowledge, we are not owners of that MPO account.
I would just ask that we validate that by actually getting a copy of the agreement with the bank for the account. But you did mention, basically only the 80% of what comes through the grant. Who's making up that other 20% on the match funds down there?
The private donations, Icon is putting that money.
Which, right, you're putting that's not quite what I understood, so I'm glad to hear that.
Yes, so up until this point in time, Icon private funds from November, the first payment that was made in November, all the way through this 1.4. The vast majority of all cash releases will be funded from Icon's account to the MPO's special account for this project, and then it will be made to the contractor directly.
Dylan just pulled up the latest bank statement for this account from Bankers Trust and just lists Des Moines area MPO. There's no mention of Central Iowa water field on there.
I would still like Scott to look at it.
I understand, but I'm just saying but he's pulled it up here right now.
Okay. And that's great. That takes one of multiple items off the list.
All right, so
Can we move to defer, Mr. Chairman?
I just think well, yes, let's.
Okay, second.
Yeah, so motion and a second, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, thank you. So we will get back, Glenn, if you have that in writing that you can do that.
Before I walk out of the room, so I will have.
All right, thank you. Item 10 is report vote on the Water Trails Destination Iowa Recreation Grant Agreement. Matt, back to you.
Yep, so this is a Destination Iowa grant from the Iowa Economic Development Authority in the amount of $7 million. These are actually federal funds under ARPA that were, I believe, announced maybe early this year, January, February, if I remember correctly. This is similar to the line of credit in the sense that the Economic Development Authority is requiring the MPO to sign the agreement for the same reasons we talked about before in terms of disbursements and specifically MPO holds a construction contract. So we want to be able to move forward with this because this $7 million is part of, I'll call it the capital stack in terms of you got the build grant, you got the Destination Iowa funds, you've got the private dollars that are in there. We need to be able to secure this funding as part of the overall stack to get this project moving, continue to move forward.
So is this not for Fluor or is this,
So
this is for Scott?
So we got two
You give
ARPA
me,
funds designations, that's one of solely for that.
okay. Well, I mean, to me, this would be, I would move approval for this. I mean, this is,
All right.
this is a good thing.
Second.
Motion and a second, any further discussion?
Yes.
Okay,
And I believe this is a great idea. We need,
No, it's fine.
I'm not questioning that whatsoever, and we'll also approve. Did the MPO co-sign this application to IEDA for that grant? And I've never seen a copy of the application. I mean, I would like to know what we're agreeing to as a part of that. And is it for phase one, it's just solely for Scott? Because as I was reading through there was discussion of 2 whitewater features in the Des Moines River, access to the river for spectating, large educational plaza, Carl Voss Trail access, and ADA accessible fishing node.
That's Scott. That's all Scott Avenue.
Okay, that helps me. So it's all part of phase one.
Exactly,
Correct.
and the MPO was not a part of the application, it was just the Great Outdoors Foundation. However, when the state was distributing the funds, they worked with the DOT, and this was the preference of the DOT and the state because of the existing build grant, that it would flow through that this way.
Look, I'm fine with that, and thank you for the explanation. That's
Yeah.
helpful.
So going forward, and I guess my question would be for you, when we do the Fluor project, is it going to be under the MPO again, or are we're going to separate it? And Icon is going to do the project?
Correct, the only part of Iowa Water Trails that is under the MPO is this build grant.
Perfect. So we're out of the water trails business at the
Yeah.
MPO after this. is-
Volunteer.
Well, we already serve on that board, so that's, you get me for volunteering for that, but we're done after we fulfill this grant opportunity at the MPO.
Yes.
If I remember correctly, the only reason why we could get the bill grant was because it was through the.
Yes.
Well, it's because he went and, anyway. Yeah.
Here, I have one more thing. It's more of a question thing for Dylan or something to work on. We have to succeed, and there's some really hard, fast timelines that have to be, and now we're getting all these multiple agreements and things floating out there. I want to make sure that we have some flow chart, some sort of a diagram that says this date, this project has to complete, and then we back into that with, we have to send out things for bids. The bid has to be secured by this date. Construction has to, so that because there's multiple pieces, multiple phases, they're all moving. I want to make sure we don't lose track because we can't afford to delay and lose the funding either. Yeah, and so a flow chart that we can.
Yeah, we have that we can provide for each.
And Polk County's doing the majority. I mean,
Well, and I'm thinking it needs to be one combined, all of these projects, so we're tracking them, because in these agreements, there are multiple pieces that talk about phase one, and not every one of those talks about the specific same project. I would like to see that on our monthly agenda, that, hey, here's the flow chart, here's the marks, next month we gotta do this and this, and
Good
just
idea.
to keep us on track. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you then. All right, any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstention. All right, that motion carries. Then item 11 is report and vote on the water trails indemnification agreement. Matt.
So this relates to the item we just discussed relative to the Destination Iowa grant. And let's see here, so I don't know, Scott, maybe I'd lean on you for this because this is in relation to the indemnity agreement between the MPO and Icon. And I think colleague you and Scott have worked on this collectively.
Well, so the concern was that there is the Great Outdoors Foundation is the recipient of this, but there is no relationship with the MPO for the project. And so I worked with council to come up with some agreement so that essentially that the Great Outdoors Foundation would similarly be in a position to indemnify us, just like we had in sub-agreement 2 with Icon. So that's the purpose of this document, was to make sure that that frankly we can, it's mutual indemnification, but that we could turn to Greater Outdoors Foundation in the event that they did not comply with the requirements of this grant.
Thank you.
One question, as you can imagine, I just want to make sure that this not only covers the MPO, but the member governments and us as representatives. As long as you believe that's the fact, I'm good.
If you put it on your list, I'll look at it.
Okay.
Well, I don't think it. I would imagine it doesn't list the specific member.
I just want to make sure it's not just the MPO, but it's our governments as well, because all of us frankly make up the MPO, correct?
but it's an agreement with the MPOs are 20.
Between two entities.
Yeah, it's a two entities. So I don't think liability would slow back, but I will look at that as well.
I pulled it up right here, and we have defined it as their respective members, managers, officers, employees, agents, successors, and permitted assigns.
There you go.
So the identification be fine.
Yes.
I'm good with that.
Move
Thank you.
approval. Second.
Motion and second, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions. That motion carries. All right, thank you. Item 12 is a report and vote on the water trails bill granted payment approval. Zach?
Thank you. We received the partial pay application number 5 from Snyder back on May 5th. It was for $1.4 million. We have has been reviewed by both Polk County and Snyder, and they have concurrence that this is the correct payment amount. Items that are included on this mostly include 3 main things. It's dewatering. The water control emergency action plan has been developed and is currently being reviewed by the DNR. Once this has been approved, they'll be able to get in the water and start working on that. They have stockpiled a lot of the steel pilings for that dewatering. A lot of it is also related to stockpiled rock and other materials. And then based on where they're at in the process, it also triggered a mobilization payment of around $600,000. So the big chunk of this payment is for that mobilization payment that was triggered as part of the DOT specifications. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, it's before you for your approval, so we can go ahead and make the payment and then seek reimbursement for the items that are reimbursable on this. I believe Gabe Nelson is on the line, who can add to this or address any other additional concerns or questions you might have.
All right. Any questions on this?
I'll move it.
Second.
In a second, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And abstentions. And motion carries. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 13 is a report and vote on the interim executive director salary. I think it's going to be a report. I'm not going to ask for a vote on this, but I've been talking to Dylan on this as far as where we head on this, and very frankly, it's also review time for all MPO staff. Normally in the process, again, we had a committee set up to review Todd, and now that Todd is not here. Todd would review Dylan. There's nobody to review Dylan now, so. What I'm going to suggest that we do is I have the same committee of Eric Clark from Waukee and Tom Hatton, I believe, Joe, right?
Yes.
On that committee, well, I'm going to ask that committee to conduct a performance evaluation for Dylan for this year, and then also come up with a suggestion for his salary as the interim director. So.
Happy to do that.
Okay, so that's what I'm gonna ask that committee to do. So there's no vote on that today. That's where we'll hit on that. With regard to item 14 on the executive director search update, we are progressing. I think I've spoken to everybody on the committee now, so I'm gonna ask a committee comprised of myself along with Tom Hawkinsmith, Tom Hadden, Ruth Randleman, Dean O'Connor, Mark Holm, and Joe and myself, as I said, to conduct or comprise the executive director search committee. We'll call a meeting here as soon as we can get something put together here shortly and start coming up with a process of how we proceed on that. So.
Well, if we jump back to I just want a quick question. So was there, and I should know this, but was there a range for Todd for the director's position, or like starting and topped out or whatever? And that was adjusted based on any across the boards that we did, right? The entire range would move. You follow me?
There was,
Opposed to just, it's not,
Minimum and a maximum.
Right.
there was a minimum, the maximum was set by board, but there was a minimum in there.
okay, that's all, yeah.
For the
But you
director.
already have something to work from. When we look at Dylan,
Yeah,
what his salary should be, we already have to work off. of.
And
you might want to send that to all of us.
It'd be nice to, I can't remember. What it was.
Yeah, do that. And this was discussed yesterday with the handbook committee a little bit.
Right.
And, yeah, we'll bring that back. We'll send it
All
to all of you, but probably bring it back as an item, just so everyone's clear that we have that salary schedule and how compensation is.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's where we are on that. Any questions or comments on that? All right. Item 15, that would be a report on DMDC 2023, Dale.
Thank you. So several of us were in Washington DC last week for the partnership trip. Gunnar and I were there from the staff, and then many of you were there from the executive and policy committee members or policy committee. Just notable events there. We had meetings with congressional offices where we talked about the raise grants that are out to them right now. The earmark requests that are also in congressional offices, update on the Purple Heart Highway project and just other projects of note. While we're out there, a couple of us, as well as DART, met with Transportation for America. They're a advocacy group that we're a member of and got an update on legislation and other things of interest to us. We facilitated some discussions on transportation infrastructure that some of you were in attendance of. And also Bob was able to speak for the MPO as our sponsor and highlighted the MPO's 4th anniversary. And I think tomorrow we'll show those slides from there. If you weren't able to see it, they're doozies, pretty fun. And just in general, been building on relationships with our Senate offices and making new relationships with Representative Nunn's office. And in fact, earlier this week, we met with them again here in Des Moines. I think you'll start seeing them attending our meetings, probably at the policy committee, just so they can be aware of what's going on and pitch in where they can and help us out as we seek federal funding. So with that, I'd open it up to anybody else that was in attendance, if there's anything you want to add, but that was a brief update of what we did last week.
Thanks, Dylan. So I'd echo Dylan's comments. I think we had a great few days there. We got a lot of good positive feedback on a lot of things. So I think it was very successful. All right. Report on upcoming events, Allison.
Very quickly, these are all in your agenda packets as well, but we have stuff coming up later this month as well. That's further out from virtual and some in person. We can quickly go through that. So all the links are in your packet. So we do have a couple non-action items. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll stop.
Okay. We do have approval of the policy committee meeting agenda for tomorrow. I guess I would we would take off the item on line of credit for that for tomorrow.
Move approval, eliminating the line of credit item.
Okay, second by Matt. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstention. All right, that carries. Back to you, Allison.
Thank you, sorry. Real quick. Okay, so we did talk about the charging fuel and infrastructure. Just wanted to give you an update on that. I'm still working with each of the cities on getting resolutions passed and things like that. Those are starting to trickle in. I know that some of you are doing it over the next week or two as well. So I'm working with your staff on those. If you haven't heard already, just get those back to me and other staff as soon as possible. One thing we did hear last Friday afternoon, very late in the day, that they did push the deadline back by 2 weeks. So we do have a little bit more wiggle room for some of the cities that were kind of rushing through this. So they have a little bit more breathing room, but most of the cities and jurisdictions are moving forward with the May 30th deadline. So we don't see any issues with that, but we will be bringing back that packet for submission June 7th for approval by the executive committee. That doesn't necessarily line up with the policy committee, but we'll try to get that out to everybody to have a look and then bring it through here. So if you have any questions on this, I'm happy to take them at this time. Also your staff are in contact, so please feel free to reach out.
So we, like this is something we discussed ahead of that out. So if exec can approve that and then submit that for the June 13th.
Yeah, so we would be submitting the day before your policy committee is the only problem in June. So, and since the packet's not ready, I didn't want to bring it before you and be like, hey, here's something that I'm gonna fill in later on. So, yeah, you'll see that full packet then.
Okay, thank you.
And I have one more, please. Thank you very much. Okay, so the cash cube is still open. There are federal dollars coming down. The new one is Protect, promoting resilient operations for transformative, efficient, and cost-saving transportation. So this one really looks at resilience. Yes, it's a mouthful, just go with Protect. But this really does look at resilience, especially in this area, our extreme weather, our flooding, and things like that. I've been in contact with Polk County Emergency Management, putting this on their radar to cross-check anything that's in the hazard mitigation plan. But I did want to let all your jurisdictions know that this is able to be applied for individually. You can go on community as well. And we do have more than 30 days on this. August 18th, 2023 is the application deadline. If you have any questions, I'm not necessarily going to be able to answer all of them, but we can find answers. That's it.
So that's going out. How's that getting out to?
So jurisdictions, so cities, counties can apply for it, MPOs can as well, but I think this might be better done under the emergency management, but we can have that discussion as cities kind of decide whether or not this is something that they want to go for.
And we're sharing this with our member communities.
Yeah.
Committees and stuff,
Okay.
so they're-
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and AJ and Cameron at emergency management have been made aware. They're doing a couple of different studies on their own, so they'll probably be reaching out to emergency management. Emergency managers within each jurisdiction as well, kind of talking about where the pinch points are on something like this. There are virtual meetings, those should be in your agenda packet as well, if you'd like to sit in them.
All right, thank you, Allison.
Yeah, for me.
All right, appreciate it. Dylan, you had a couple of.
Yeah, I do have a couple of things. One, I wanted to update you on the Safe Streets for All process. We had RFP out on the streets that closed last Friday. We did receive responses from 3 consultant teams, and they were large teams too. So that'll be something that you'll see coming forward pretty soon here. We'll establish a committee to review those, do interviews, and then bring forward a recommendation of what we want to do moving forward there. So if you have questions on any of that, please reach out to me or Zach, and we can give you more information there. Also wanted to let you know that the Iowa DOT, in conjunction with the US DOT, is working on planning funds for next fiscal year. And this is significant because the planning funds that we receive are based on population, and we've still been working under the 2010 population, and they're starting to switch that over to the 2020 population. So as they do that, they take a look at the formula that's used that gives us our funding. And they've asked for comments back by May 31st. So we will be responding back to the Iowa DOT and working with them on that process. The initial estimates that I've received is based on that 2020 population change. We should receive another $100,000 roughly in operating funds going forward. That would start, not the budget you just approved, but the 25 budget, because that wouldn't all be finalized until about October. So just want to let you know that we'll do what we can to keep the formula the way it is so that it's most advantageous to us. It doesn't sound like DOT will probably be making too many changes, but they do have that open right now, getting feedback from other MPOs on that process. A couple other things I won't belabor too much. Just wanted, as I mentioned at the last meeting, the special meeting we had, I'm trying to meet with all of you individually. So if I haven't met with you yet, I will be reaching out soon. I met with many of you in DC, so thank you for doing that. And the purpose of this is just to understand what we can be doing better moving forward to try to make it as stable as possible. Tommy mentioned it's been a rough couple of months. We recognize that. We just want to bring everybody together and make sure we're going in the same direction and make things a smooth transition when we do get a permanent director in here. And then just on that note to close, business continues as normal here. We are doing everything we need to do to kind of make sure all the changes have been made internally with the bank accounts and so forth. We've got that about all the way completed now, so you shouldn't see any drop off in performance from us in terms of what you're getting from your communities, projects moving forward. If you do see anything, if there's anything we can be doing to reassure you, your staff, your councils, what have you, we're happy to go meet with anybody, do whatever we need to do to make everybody comfortable as we go through this transition.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate what Dylan's doing and congratulate him on doing that because I think that's a great thing. And we do need to keep this organization maintained and thriving as an organization. And I just think Dylan and staff are doing a fabulous job to continue that job. So thank you for everybody.
Thank you. And thanks to other staff here who are helping me get more familiar with the banks and ever have.
Thanks everybody for all working together. I think we truly have all of us here have the best interest of the organization. So I appreciate everybody's efforts to go in that direction. So. And thank you everybody also for the recognition of the NBC. That was completely unnecessary, but I appreciate that. So thank you for that. So, with that, we are adjourned and see you tomorrow.
And there is, let's be clear, Bob, there's no exact tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah.